Welcome to B2B Marketers on a Mission, a podcast for B2B marketers that helps you to question the conventional, think differently, disrupt your industry, and take your marketing to new heights. Each week, we talk to B2B marketing experts who share inspirational stories, discuss their thoughts on trending topics, and provide useful marketing tips and recommendations. And now, here's your host and co-founder of Einblick Consulting, Christian Klepp. Okay, welcome everyone to this episode of the B2B Marketers on a Mission podcast, where you get your weekly dose of B2B marketing insights. I'm your host, Christian Klepp, and today I'm joined by someone on a mission to help companies and employees succeed with LinkedIn. So coming to us from Connecticut, I believe it is, Sandra Long. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christian. I'm excited to be here.
Great to be connected, Sandra, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation because as we were just discussing before I hit record, wow, this is such a pertinent topic of something that's been going on LinkedIn and will continue to take place. So let's just dive right in. So here comes the understatement of the year. You are no stranger to LinkedIn. In fact, you are an early adopter of LinkedIn who is also an authority on topics like personal branding and social selling. But just for this conversation, let's zero in on the topic of how people can improve their B2B social selling on LinkedIn. Let's start off this conversation with, talking about what social selling is not. And I think it lies in the name itself. The name doesn't really give it justice.
It really is a name that can get people confused. And I think there should be more emphasis on the word social than selling. It's really a place to build relationships and be social and attract people to want to do business with us. It's not, it's not Amazon. This is not like, it's not just like you have your products up and people are going to buy them or you're just going to spit out advertising. In fact, those kind of strategies really don't work that well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it was just like what I was saying to you earlier, like, people trying to reach out to you. And I think the trending word these days is pitch slap, right? Mm-hmm. So when somebody immediately tries to solicit their business or, their services and products to you before they even find out whether you are a right fit for their company or not. And that seems to be like a bit of a game of, what do they call it? Numbers, spray and pray, probably all of the above.
It's just way too prevalent. I'm seeing it too often and people, for some reason, are bought into that that's the way to go.
Yeah.
And it's really more of a turnoff than anything.
Right. So, that said, talk to us about what you believe some of the common, and you mentioned some of them already, but talk to us about some of the common misconceptions and mistakes when it comes to B2B, like social selling on LinkedIn, what people need to do to address them.
Okay. Well, no, that's a big question. There's so much, we started a little bit into this path, but
sure.
So I'd say the first thing from an organizational perspective, one of the mistakes I see is lack of alignment, because you really want to make this more of a team effort and even, between marketing and sales. And for some companies, it's even tying into HR. So getting the alignment and, coordination and cooperation across just enhances everything that we're trying to do on LinkedIn and social in general. So that would be the first mistake. The other mistake I see sort of on an individual perspective is that a lot of sellers' LinkedIn profiles are not really oriented toward their buyer. So maybe you've hired some salespeople, and those salespeople have a profile that was really just their resume. It was the same profile that when you hired them, they were trying to get hired by you, and you've hired them. And now what happens is your potential prospects look at them and they don't connect the dots. They can't figure out, well, how is this person going to help me? I don't understand. It just looks like a resume. It's really actually the profiles are more suited for your people to get hired by recruiters versus selling to prospects. So that profile piece is a big missing piece. And then we talked about messaging. There's a lot of confusion, and we've got sellers that are out there thinking that they should just be pitching, and without thinking through the better ways to approach people and to make things, to turn things from cold to warm. And the best way to do that is to be really focused on that individual and do the research about that person's profile, that person's company, so that you can understand how can I be valuable. And so when I am sending a message, it actually is something that people want to get, versus like what we were talking about earlier, where the walls go up, right? I'm getting this pitch message. I don't want that. And then even on the posting side, being, I hear, well, this mistake is something that you see is folks are wondering, I'm posting, how come we're not getting any traction? Well, I would say back up and think more broadly about engaging. So all those kind of mistakes, starting with organizational, in terms of alignment, all the way through individuals. There's a lot of opportunity for everyone to get to the next level.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I wanted to jam on something a little bit that you said a while ago, if we can. Let's try to look at this, I guess, from a diagnostic point of view, I think might be the right word, and go back to the root of the problem. Because as you said, it's a case of organizational or internal alignment, and also about like motivation, like what is the reason for them to do all this outreach. And yes, at the end of the day, you want to generate new business and close these leads and deals, but it's obviously got to be more than that, right? But I suppose it's because these people were mandated to try to reach out to as many people as possible and to try to connect with them, book the call, and close the leads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that as being one of the major issues on platforms like LinkedIn?
Well, so yeah, setting up goal setting is important, but I think that for those organizations that are focused on the client first, they're just going to be more successful. And I see this all the time in the training that we do. And but folks, the average seller needs to get guidance on this. They don't necessarily know, people don't grow up with this information naturally, right? And I think that's why we're seeing so many sort of bad behavior, not just from the automation, but from people thinking, well, here I am. And if you think about it, it's more, how would you engage in real life, when you meet someone at an event, or you go to their office, or you're introduced, you're not going to immediately start saying, here's my brochure, here's what I have to offer. You're going to try to get to know someone. So why is it that why is it that they're taking this other approach, and they're just starting to do that pitching? It's something that we really need to educate people about.
That's absolutely right. And let me just go back to what you said earlier, bad behavior, and specifically bad behavior online, because you've probably experienced this. I've experienced it too. I call it being active aggressive versus passive aggressive. So people that pitch slap you, or they try to solicit their business or their services and whatnot. And if you don't respond to them, then they send you these they're very pushy messages, like, okay, almost to the point of like, why aren't you responding?
Yes.
Yeah. So I suppose it is a question of like educating people and saying like, hey, you would never do that at an in-person networking event or at a conference. So why would you be doing it online? Because it's easier.
Right. Yeah, I guess they've never thought about it, but when you approach anyone and say, when you're on the receiving end, nobody wants to get that. So why are people sending it?
Exactly. Talk to us about a social selling challenge that you've managed to solve in the past 12 months or so with a client or with a partner.
So I would say I have a client that I work with on a regular basis, and they wanted to have their team members use LinkedIn for thought leadership, for visibility. And there was a challenge in terms of their engagement. We were doing, training sessions for, hundreds of people. So the way we solved it what worked out great was created a small focus group that was basically a thought leadership group, so sort of leading the way for the company. And then having a real focused effort with those people that was specific. It wasn't like a training that was more generic. It was very specific to them and the kind of value that they could bring to their specific clients in their specific territory. So that worked out really well.
Yeah, I loved how you talked about thought leadership, because I wanted to get your I wanted to get your thoughts on thought leadership. Because I've seen some companies get this wrong, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, because what happens is more often than not is somebody develops that content, and it usually ends up being somebody in marketing, and the rest of the employees just push that out on LinkedIn. But that's not really, that kind of defeats the purpose of thought leadership. Am I right? So what would you say would be the better approach, right? Going back to your case study.
So it really depends on the team and the organization, because I've seen different companies gravitate toward different approaches.
Mhm.
So some companies want to have their people become creators of content, and they want to encourage them. They want to give them training. They want to motivate them and even incentivize them to be creators. But then there are other companies that do not want to have their folks, particularly sales folks, pull time out of their territory or out of their selling conversations to be creators. They want to have them be sharing, curating content, engaging with content. So it really depends on the organization. I would say majority of the companies that I work with want primarily to be teaching their folks about the engagement and maybe do a little bit of the creating, but not have a heavy pressure on creating posts every week or anything. So and again, you have to find out what the leadership, how they want to do it, how do they want to use their time, what's important to them. And from there, we then make the proper approach.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It's almost as if you could probably say, like, not all content creators are created equal.
Yes.
Right? Because it's different motivations, and it also, I suppose, depends on the content or what they're talking about when it comes to thought leadership, because that's such a broad topic too, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it too, and this is my belief, that you can be a thought leadership without doing a lot of creation. If
Sure.
you are finding and curating and sharing really valuable content with insights, not just
Right.
sharing it, but with valuable insights, with your twist, with your perspective, with your valuable story around that content, that's tremendous. Or going and finding this content and adding your commentary that takes it to the next level, not just says great post, but takes that content further down the path of a conversation. That kind of thing, that kind of strategy is definitely thought leadership and can attract the buyers that we want.
That's such an important point. I'm glad you brought that up, because you're talking about curating content or saying, okay, this was a great read, was an article written in the Harvard Business Review, but why was it so great? What's your take on it? What's your point of view, right? Or maybe even, why did you disagree with it? That could be an interesting conversation as well.
Yeah, the why is key. And if it's left out, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this might seem obvious to people like you and I, but why do you think it's important to conduct the relevant research and have the right social selling strategy in place? I think there's plenty of examples out there of how it can go wrong if you don't have those things in place, right?
So there's research sort of from the organizational perspective, and there's research for the individual. And I think it's all important. I definitely think it helps inform us with our strategy, and it helps us do a better job when we are reaching out to a prospect or client. One of the things I do want to caution, though, is over researching, right? I have one client who has been researching for so long, and I'm trying to get them out of the research phase into the action phase, right?
Yeah. Over planning, right?
Yeah.
Over planning and neglecting the execution.
Yes. I've seen it.
Or what is that saying? Like, a plan is only as good as its execution, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, it gets back to that initial part of our conversation. It's social.
Yep.
We need to just try to be comfortable and relaxed and build relationships. So if we can do that around content, around thought leadership, being interested in other people, there's a certain amount of research, but then it's getting into it and participating, right? Engaging.
Absolutely. People talk about that all the time on LinkedIn, don't they? Like, the engagement is just as important, if not sometimes even more important, than posting your own content sometimes.
100%. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, Again, talk to us about the importance and role of having the right content for social selling, because we've seen people that are curating content, but it's not necessarily relevant to them or the people that they're trying to reach out to.
Yeah. So think about our prospects that we want to attract, and they really are all on a journey. Think about, why do they come to LinkedIn? They come to LinkedIn to become informed, and they come to learn. They want to see what's happening with my network, what's happening in my industry. That's why I'm coming onto LinkedIn. So if you're part of that conversation, things that they care about, right? Whether it's people that they care about, you're engaging with them, or topics that they care about, then you will become part, you will be put yourself on that radar screen of that prospect and buyer. And especially you meet let's say you have a great meeting with someone and it's October, and now here we are, it's March, April. And does that person remember that fantastic conversation you had back then? Or if they've seen you on LinkedIn, you're visible, you're reminding them, you're like being top of mind, so that as they're thinking through all of the things that are happening in their industry, they're making decisions, they're moving along, you're part of their thought process, which is what we all want to have happen. We want to be in the minds of all these people that want to buy from us potentially.
Absolutely, absolutely top of mind. You know what? Like, as you were giving that answer, I actually thought of another question. What's your take on, I mean, speaking of top of mind, what's your take on dark social? Like these channels that you can't, these channels that you can't necessarily measure in quantifiable formats. Like, people are having conversations in online communities and Slack channels and DMs and messages about companies or their products and services.
I mean, think about it. There's so many online platforms, online places and spots, and now we're seeing a lot with audio, right? So there's just enormous amount of places that people are spending their time. And I think for all of us, we need to determine, where is our prospect spending their time, and our buyers and our network and our clients, and then focusing on those areas. So, I spend majority of my time on LinkedIn because that is where my business is, my network. Certainly, I've dabbled in some of the audio pieces, Clubhouse, and I do LinkedIn audio events, which I'm enjoying because I'm a beta tester for that. And but I think our clients are everywhere. You think about the buyer, when I talk about that buyer's journey, they're going everywhere looking for information, right? So yes, LinkedIn is a great place for that engagement, but the buyers are researching across the board. So we kind of have to be aware of that and realize what's out there.
So be aware, be conscious, and be informed about, you're talking about an ecosystem essentially, right?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay, great. So we get to the part of the conversation where you give us something actionable, because that's what the show is about as well, right? So now let me just set this up for a second here, Sandra. Let's appreciate that this stuff doesn't happen, not all of it anyway. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't download an app and presto, you've got a successful social selling strategy. But what are some steps that people can take right now to improve what they're doing on LinkedIn when it comes to social selling?
Okay, so there's a lot of things, but I'd love to share this quick idea,
Please.
Which is focus on your prospects' profile and content. So you go to your CRM and look at your pipeline and look at through all of who are this set of prospects. Am I properly engaged and connected to all those companies that are on my current pipeline? Because you want to have the deep connections, not just one or two connections, which can put you at risk. If that company's on your pipeline, you've only got one connection, I'm a little worried for you, right? Because we've got this thing called the Great Resignation or reshuffle or whatever, and it's too risky. So being deep with all those companies on your pipeline, and then looking at those people, looking at their individual content, and following them and engaging with their content. And I can tell you that by doing that, it's something that your prospect will notice you, especially if you're putting valuable comments on their content. Now, not every one of our prospects is posting on LinkedIn. If you've got a pipeline that maybe you've got, 15 opportunities on the pipeline at various stages, and if you've got, 5 or 6 decision makers or participants from each one of those, then you've got over 100 people. And so even if just a few of those people, you should be aware who are the people that are posting and that are active, and making sure you're engaging with those people, because they're there, and that's an easy way for you to make really fast impact. So I base it on your own pipeline, like make your own pipeline be stronger and more effective and help your process.
No, that's some pretty good advice. And on that note, that's a great segue into the next question. How can you make sure that what you're doing is working? So let's try to talk about metrics if we can.
So metrics are tricky for a lot of companies because of the fact that, we've got to get reporting in of how these things happen. And, salespeople, if it can be notoriously difficult to get that type of information. Now, definitely you can have tags on your CRM so that you can understand when business or opportunities were generated as a result of LinkedIn activity, which I think is great to do. For me, I'll tell you, my measurement is a new meeting. If I've got a new meeting or new conversation was really what I'd call a new conversation, whether that's a Zoom or a phone or a live or a coffee, but that new conversation is what I'm looking for any type of, social selling activity. So, having that, if you can track that on your CRM, that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and I would probably also throw in, when you're having these meetings with these new connections, also ask them, okay, how did I even come up on your radar, right? Like, where did you hear something like about me, or did you listen to one of my interviews, or did you read my post, or what made you decide to jump on this call with me today?
That's always my first question for everybody is how did you find me? Because if they're reaching out, they're either reaching out through LinkedIn or they're sending me an email. And I always want to know, did someone refer me? Did you see my post? Was there an article you read? Was it my book? What was it? Because we all want to get that information, and even keeping track of it is great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. The next question. Okay, let's try to keep this one focused to social selling, because LinkedIn has changed so much, right? But just specifically with regards to social selling, what are some major trends and shifts that you've seen on LinkedIn that people should be paying attention to if they're doing social selling?
So I think the biggest one would really be around video and audio. And that's so much opportunity, and not just in the posting. I mean, obviously we can do great video in the feed, but using video and audio in the messaging. I love to do that with clients and prospects. It makes your message more impactful. You differentiate yourself. So let's say you have a very nice initial conversation with a prospect, and perhaps they've talked to 3 or 4 of your competitors. And then after that call, of course, we want to be connected to that person. Then we send out a really nice video message thanking them for the meeting, or audio message. And that's going to distinguish us from everyone else. So I think that using video and audio is terrific on the messaging side. And of course, we have very nice video opportunities in the profile. So you can put a video right now at your headshot. You can use video in the featured section. And they're beta testing LinkedIn audio events. So depending, if you can get your hands on that, that's great. And you don't even have to be a host like I am. You can be a person who joins, raises your hand to speak, or even joins and then participates in networking while you're in this event, because you can see profiles, you can connect and message people while this event is going on. If it's about your topic, your thought leadership topic, how great is that? So really, I think video and audio is probably the most exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other one to take note of is, and for me personally, this is for the better, but LinkedIn has started becoming a little bit more vigilant and policing those that are trying to use automation to do outreach, like mass outreach.
Yeah.
So they've reduced the number of connections or people you're able to connect with on a weekly basis and so forth, right?
Yeah, that's true. And so, I mean, I think that LinkedIn wants us to be connected more authentically. And I think they definitely are against automation. Automation can get you in trouble. So the kind of automation that can get you in trouble is the automated messaging, automated profile viewing. Now you are able to do automated posting. That's something that they allow, and there's third-party apps you can do, but definitely not profile viewing or messaging.
Right. That's probably not something you should automate anyway, in my humble opinion.
Totally agree. I mean, it's such, it really comes across, right, if that happens.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, case in point, what I was telling you about earlier, right? Okay. Speaking of which, tell us about a status quo that you passionately disagree with and why.
Well, first of all, from a status quo perspective, there's, depending on the person and depending on who we're, the group of people, there's various status quos, and there's definitely, like, I would say, friction on certain topics, right? That there's different opinions. So one of them is having to do with how personal are you on LinkedIn? So that the status quo was always that this is the business site, this is only professional. And that status quo, that's evolved into where we are today, which is much more personal. Now you've got people that have been using LinkedIn for years, some of whom are very upset and call it the Facebookization of LinkedIn and all of that. But I think most people have come around to the fact that social means personal too, and that there's sort of like, we all have to decide, where do we create those boundaries? We all want to, I think, and I recommend that we do bring in the personal element, but that we create those boundaries that is right for us as individuals. And so that whole topic, I think, is something that's got a lot of friction and conversation around it. And then, of course, the pitching and the messaging, which we talked about. I think one other topic for companies, which I've seen a big evolution, companies used to be reticent about teaching their employees about LinkedIn, thinking that this is just about a job search platform. And more companies have gone away from all the savvy ones know that their employees are part of their brand assets, right? And those employees have much greater impact and influence across LinkedIn than just their LinkedIn company page. So those savvy companies, but you still once in a while hear the companies that will say, no, we're worried about this, or we can't have that. So that's definitely been a big evolution. So a lot of change, a lot of things are changing. And I think mostly for the better with regards to a lot of that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I love that last bit too, where you're talking about, like, I suppose it's empowering employees to help also build their own personal brands, but at the same time also being evangelists for the organization that they're working for, right?
Right.
And I suppose it depends on the organization, because you can argue that forward-thinking organizations would empower their people that way. There's the other faction that would disagree with that point of view.
Well, you're right, Christian, because years ago, companies, and maybe in some companies even today, are afraid of the personal brand, whether it's their employee that has a big blog following or a big, YouTube subscribers, or is doing video on LinkedIn. Some of them are very afraid or nervous, but I'd say the savvy companies know that they can power that up, right? That really the best scenario is you combine the personal brands with the company brands to really excite people about the organization and excite people about the industry and what's happening professionally. And that attracts people more than anything, rather than just doing the company line, right? People care about people. So
Yes.
combining that and harnessing that power, just like you said, is key.
Absolutely. Interesting times we live in.
It really is interesting.
Yeah. Sandra, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise and insights with the listeners. So, quick intro to yourself and how folks out there can get in touch with you.
Well, look for me, Sandra Long. I'm on LinkedIn is where to find me. And there's quite a few Sandra Longs. So if you have trouble, you can put in LinkedIn or put in New York. I'm in the New York area.
Mm-hmm.
You can also find my book on Amazon, which is LinkedIn for Personal Branding. And I love to connect with everyone who's listening. Let me know you listen to the show. That would be great.
Fantastic. Sandra, as expected, this was such a great conversation. So thanks again for your time. Take care, stay safe, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Christian. It was great.
Okay. Bye for now.